Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we have some minor issues with Harley in Austria. We'll be getting an alternate from the Rouge Foundation coming in the program. Want to make it open lines and have people call into the program. Over the summer, we've had a few less callers than expected. A lot of people listen to the program on what I call they listen after hours, and of course they're listening to the show. A lot of them will say, "Oh, wish I could call in." If you can, even if you're busy during your busy day, it's a really good idea to try to call into the program and voice your opinions. The main reason I say this is that people should understand that if someone else raises the question, and as time has gone on, I've learned to try to communicate better, to be not quite so technical, to lead people by questions rather than telling them didactically all of my conclusions. And I found that when people can own the truth by doing that, it makes it much more reasonable. Even when we can have tons of documentation, a lot of people get an emotional response that blocks them from even investigating. And I think that's one of the things that's really important that people should understand, is that we're trying to get people to understand that they need to own the truth. They need to own the situation that's going on in terms of what's happening with their health, etc. Now, one of the things I want to talk about in this first segment is what's coming up in terms of publications and what's coming up in news. This Friday, we have a huge sale coming on Friday through Monday. I've negotiated with Pure Water Systems. Instead of 10%, if you put in the code NutriMed over the holiday, and that's only over those 4 days, you'll get 15% off for all of our water systems. Whole house, Bev 100, countertop, Bev 300 under the counter, Bev 200 base station for emergency preppers. We also are negotiating a $50 off on all LUMEN photons, so you get $50 off every different device on top of our savings from going through us. And we have the 7 for Heaven sale, which is a sale on top of a sale. So if you saw previous sale prices, including multi-packs, where you buy 6 and get 1 free, or you get special prices or free shipping, there'll be 7% on top of that. So it's a sale on top of a sale. And for those doing international, you're really going to love this, because we have fixed prices for international shipping. And so if you order a huge order, you're going to get shipping that's phenomenal. I mean, you could never shop anywhere else and get the shipping prices we're going to be doing if you're actually ordering, especially on a sale, where you get tremendous sales and the fixed shipping price. So that's not good. That's going to save you a tremendous amount of money. We have a lot of new customers from Australia, South Africa, and other countries around the world because of our new international order line that allows you to order 24/7, and you can put in information. Also, log in and make sure you've got your newsletter, because I'll be putting up a newsletter this week for over the Labor Day sale. My books are coming along very nicely. I have a number of books that are actually in progress, and I'll give you some information on that. The first is and I've changed the title a little bit to make it a little bit more people-friendly. It's called Dr. You, Y-O-U. And it's not a Chinese doctor. It means I'm trying to convince you that you need to be your own health professional. I'm going to explain, if you want to call it the convergence of Eastern Western medicine in terms of quantum physics, in simple terms. You know, we call and everything can be explained, to be honest with you. If you can't explain even complex ideas into simple ideas, they probably can't be challenged, and they're probably not true. And the science behind it. Could explain how we're seeing the convergence of genetic medicine. That's why the federal government jumped in and jumped on the people with 23andMe in terms of chromosome testing, genetic testing for SNPs. And again, remember, a gene isn't deterministic. It doesn't determine that you're going to get an illness. It just increases the probability if you have nutritional deficiencies and toxics. So if you have a difficulty with adding methyl groups to folic acid to form the 5-methylfolate, you're going to have a much higher incidence of problems like dysmyelination, blood disorders, digestive enzyme problems, etc. But if you take the right nutrients to increase methylation, you're fine. If you have heavy metal exposure and you have methylation disorders, you're going to get B12 deficiency, and you'll have an accumulation of heavy metals. But if you take things like bio-LVR and SEM-ethyl, you can overcome that. So you can overcome a toxic load or a gene SNP if you have the activated form of vitamin that jumps the genetic conversion problem, which is either caused by a genetic SNP or polymorphism, where the molecule or the enzyme is slightly different in terms of its quaternary shape or the enzyme active site. And when you do that with nutrients, again, just like with genetic engineering, there are new genetic engineering research going on where people have serious genetic defects, they can overcome those. There's research going on, for example, on mice where they can inactivate the extra chromosome 21 so they can turn off Down syndrome if people have a genetic polymorphism that's going to dramatically increase vascular disease or other problems. Gene therapy is going to come along, but it's not going to do it without nutrients. You're going to see a convergence of epigenetics, which includes things like doing tests like the QRMA. The bioplasma NLS device, which comes from the Russian Space Agency, allows you to actually not only section organs, which is as or more accurate than a CT or MRI scan without any radiation, but it also allows you to actually change your bioplasmatic body and rebalance it, and then go back and actually even test the efficacy of different nutrients. It's an amazing technology. And I'll be collaborating with the scientists on both the QRMA and the bioplasma NLS. We're also looking at other technologies such as the release of the static magnetic field machine developed by scientists in China. And I'll be talking to the engineers involved with the bioplasma NLS and the QRMA, which is my favorite machine for diagnosis, the QRMA. And then if people want to do functional medicine testing, I recommend the labtestingdirect.com. Lab Testing Direct covers most of the tests. There are a few other laboratories that that are available as well, like Dunwoody Labs and Great Plains Laboratory, that are not yet under the umbrella of Lab Testing Direct. But Lab Testing Direct covers the main labs like Genova Lab, Metametrics in Atlanta, Doctors Data, and many other labs, and 23andMe. 23andMe were stopped last December from being able to produce a gene analysis of over 1,000 genes that can actually tell you if you have a predisposition to specific illnesses or metabolic problems that can predispose you to anything from adrenal failure to diabetes to mental illness, etc. And as we start to tease these things out, it's going to transform medicine completely. The doctors and health providers of all types, whether they're professional trainers, naturopaths, or just grandmothers, are going to learn, and especially with my ebooks that I'll be publishing in a series of ebooks, they'll learn how to become Dr. You, to fix yourself. We're also working on several other books that are coming along. The book on Fukushima is nearing the corner. I've been very busy this summer with lots of other activities, but that'll be coming out very shortly. It could come out as early as this weekend, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm going to have to make it book one because we'll probably be doing other updates of the book on Fukushima. A summary came out a few weeks ago, which I published, in terms of what can technically be done to fix the Fukushima Daiichi site, and how we can remediate and prevent the release of airborne and waterborne radioisotopes. And also talked about some of the deadly effects that are going on. So we'll be getting back on the professional divers, Dana Durnford and his colleagues, in terms of their secondary visit up to the Georgia Strait region of British Columbia, looking at the intertidal dead zone, where the radioisotopes, primarily now not only radioiodine but strontium and cesium, plutonium, etc., are killing the intertidal zone. So these are serious issues. It also pushes us. Every crisis we have, either personally in life or corporately, pushes us to try to achieve better things. For example, we know that much of what we call aging is a convergence of genetic polymorphisms of your DNA, inherited, nutritional deficiencies, and toxins. And there's a degree of programming in the DNA to cause program senescence, which means you accumulate bad information so you don't turn on the right genes to extend cell life. Because you have the same genetics as when you're an embryo and a fetus as you are when you're 82 if you die, or 100. There's really no reason technically why we can't have zero senescence, which means you don't physically age. You die from accidents, wars, and stupidity. As I say, these are called on purposes, rather than dying of toxic polypharmacy, medical mishaps, or bad food. And again, a lot of our food right now is extremely toxic. There's 29 different subnames for MSG, such as hydrolyzed vegetable protein, very, very bad excitotoxin. Aspartame puts holes in your brains. Splenda releases chlorine and converts, and when you heat Splenda, to dioxin. So you should be aware these are all extremely dangerous to your body. If you have any questions on any health issues, spiritual issues, our talk yesterday with Matthew in the first hour, my son is going back now to Portland with his family, do call in 800-259-5791. We may also be joined by one of the substitutes for Hardy Schlanger from the Roosh Foundation during this hour. And Barry Chamish is coming on with a... Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And I'm going to do a little different. Before we go into the news, I'm going to actually talk about some of the questions we recently have, because I get a lot of emails every day. You'd be amazed how busy I am, because I'm writing. I'm also working on writing a book that will be coming out probably. I'll delay on release of it until the final stages where they're going to actually partition the state of Israel and start the blood sacrifice. That'll be coming out from, I guess, probably within the next year. And that book will be the first of a series of books on clay and iron. That website I'll be reactivating and posting a lot of new information and news sites over there. So besides that, we have the book on Fukushima, which will be coming out probably within the next week, Quantic Functional Medicine, the first booklet. And I'll try to make them relatively short so they'll be easy for you to read. You can, I will be eventually transferring over to Amazon too, so you will be able to get an ebook version on your iPhone or iPad or Android, as well as on your computer. You can, once you download the book, you can share it with anybody. I just hope that what you'll do is you'll take it to heart and realize that you need to get back in control, just like we have our jurisdictionary program for people to have become pro se litigant experts and know how to use legal services, so that even if you hire a lawyer, you know how to manage things. You realize they take the best of medicine. There are some very good things in surgery, imaging, and other areas. There's some very bad things, and very few people have the guts or the knowledge to actually talk about what is good and bad in medicine. They're frightened, or they're unaware, or they don't want to know because they'll get in trouble with their colleagues. I don't have any of those problems. I really don't care in terms of what the response to the medical profession has, because everything I say is quoted from medical journals that they publish, quoted from scientific research, and is validated by genetic and other tests that can be proven by anybody. So on any particular area, that's why I strongly recommend that if your doctor disagrees with me or your health professional, have them call me, have them email me, have them come on air and actually raise their questions on air, and we'll see who wins the debate. It will be quite messy because I do what's called intellectual vivisection. I will dissect them intellectually on air, and I will prove to them that they don't know what they're talking about. And as I say, if they can prove me right or wrong, that's good. If they can prove me wrong and give me specific quotes, that would be excellent. So really important that people know the call-in number is 800-259-5791, 800-259-5791. And we have Eric in Pennsylvania would like to be interested in having James and Moriarty on the show. Gee, I don't know who James and Moriarty. That sounds funny. Go ahead, Eric. What's your question?
Hey, Dr. Bill, how are you?
Yes, tell me all about who's James and or Moriarty. It sounds like the detectives.
It's a husband and wife, James and Joanne Moriarty's. They were in Libya doing business during the devastation that the United States wreaked havoc on the country and destroyed. So I just wanted to suggest you might want to.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you can send me more information by email on, if you have even their contact information, their website, send that to me and we'll contact them and see if it's worth. What are they? If you were to summarize in 2 or 3 points, what are the main things that they discovered? Because I spoke, for example, just earlier today to Barry Chamish, and Barry, of course, we know as a Canadian and an American. And a dual citizen of Israel. They tried to literally assassinate him 3 times as a journalist because he proved that Shimon Peres was responsible for Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. He's collaborating directly with the Vatican to hand over many religious sites, which have been happening over years, but now up to 73 sites. And there's been literally, as my son mentioned yesterday, Matthew, there's been a convergence or an amalgamation between the Vatican, which considers itself the chief of all the religious churches on the planet, and the World Council of Churches. They even have a special, if you want to call it, memorial site right in Vatican City, right outside the Vatican City, actually. And what people should be aware of is when they go into countries like this and they balkanize or break them up, they are stage managing all sides. They stage manage the communists, ISIS. We know that one of the senior people of ISIS was a actor who happens to be a member of Mossad. One of the things that Barry is very concerned about is his family is still there, his wife and children, and he sees Israel as committing suicide, which I see as well. Israel is surrounded on both sides. He told me that today that Syria fired in 5 missiles on Israel and it caused a lot of havoc and a lot of injuries. If Hezbollah also started firing, these are smaller, but the more advanced Scud-type missiles, they can carry a payload of fuel air bombs, biological weapons, or radiological, even Cobalt-60, which can be a sticky bomb or dirty bomb, which is virtually impossible to decontaminate because it sticks to your cells and tissues. So unless you strip their skin off and the inside lining of their lungs, you can't decon them. But Barry's basically saying is Israel's finished, and I tend to agree. I think Israel's being prepared as a sacrifice. One of the things Matthew mentioned yesterday is the ultra-Orthodox rabbis believe in the commentaries of the rabbis on the Talmud, and these commentaries are pretty damn satanic. And we have to face the facts, whether it's inside Christianity or any other religion or cult, that we can't tolerate this kind of cultic activity because it destroys humanity. And all of our wars right now, basically, in a sense, have some religious or pseudo-religious, like communism, pseudo-tone. The destruction of economies is also tied because we know that basically the international, and I don't really use the word Jew because it's not really correct. We'll talk about the satanic bankers are running things, and they're directly allied with the Vatican and the NATO and the United Nations, the Western banks. And even in Russia, it's the same group of people that are running the banks there. They just happen to be allied with the communist regime there, and Mr. Putin, which is why Mr. Putin's not responding with military force to stop the destruction of all these people in eastern Ukraine. So the same thing happened in Libya when Muammar Gaddafi tried to set up an oil bourse and a gold standard for 22 Islamic nations because he didn't like the Western dominated, what I call satanically dominated banks from stripping their country to the bone. They killed him. And, if you look at the social network that was support, people could get easy loans for cars and homes. Their education was 100% paid for. Nobody paid for health care. It was the most advanced, if you want to call it, country there. And it was very tolerant. It had people coming in to support the oil industry from China. All the oil refineries were run by other countries. You didn't see the kind of extremism that arose as soon as they got rid of Muammar Gaddafi and the 18 different tribal groups. All of this is by design, because when you read things like the Grand Chessboard by Zbigniew Brzezinski and these other monsters, what they wanted to do is break up the world so it's easier to digest, just like a beast breaking up its prey or a herd of wildebeest so it can get the weaker ones and destroy them. So they would love to break up America, like the Hunger Games, into a number of sub-republics, so it's easier to digest by a new world order. You can't have a strong, real Christian, not pseudo-Christian, a real Christian, follower of Yeshua HaMashiach, which is a more correct name than Jesus, America, that has a godly principles of international operation instead of warfare, where we disagree with a country, we come in and bomb them, or do air flights over. In fact, right now, the big problem is the ISIS and the terror of what's going on in ISIS. In fact, when I opened up the news, some of the first things I see: Syrian conflict, Islamic State committed war crimes, and this is statements now being made by the United Nations. We should be allied with the Assad government against ISIS. We're supporting them. Barry Chamish this morning said that, stay right there, gave $300 million to Hamas to create weapons against Israel. So he's emailed me specific information. Now, if you were to summarize the 2 or 3 points that James and his wife Moriarty's, who were in Libya when this happened, what would you say their main couple of statements, if they were to come on air, would probably say, because you've looked at their website or seen their material?
Yeah, they keep updating the information on what's going on there, and they're pretty much. Are they still there? Are they still there in Libya? No, they're here, and they've been by the intelligence agencies of the United States. They have been, because they were wealthy business people, and now they're poor out of their mind. They've been devastated financially. No, they don't get even opportunity to get jobs anywhere. It's pretty crazy what the CIA and all these other secret agencies have done to their previous lifestyle. Yeah. So they could describe pretty much first.
What would you say if you were them and describing it? Because I'm sure you read their material. Because I'll just shoot a few bullet points to see if any of them match. Well, what I've heard is, number one, the social devastation means no one's safe.
Atrocities that were made by the hired people, let's just call them, they were called rebels, but they were actually criminals from other countries like Turkey, and they were hired by
Turkey and Yemen and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and elsewhere, trained in Jordan and other places by American CIA and Special Forces trainers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And armed to the teeth. For example, one of the statements that Barry Tomish made this morning on the air, he'll talk about it on the air, is that $300 million given by the U.S. State Department to Hamas, which used it to purchase arms and weapons to cause destruction to Israel. And by the way, if Israel starts getting attacked by missile attacks, and he said it already, if Israel starts to use nukes, which is basically their Samson option, you might as well nuke the entire area, because if you nuke, for example, Damascus, most of North Israel will become radioactive, and all their orchards and all the other places. So the fact is, Israel is done. And what I see is probably with all these blood moons within a matter of months, perhaps in the next, because the Shemitah year ends, and the first day of what's called Sukkot potentially is September 28th, 2015, which is just a little over a year away. And with the blood moons, what I see coming is partitioning of the state of Israel, which is an abomination that desolates. And the abomination is a blood sacrifice that says they don't accept the sacrifice of God in the flesh. Not a separate person. Again, this is against all the Trinitarianism, which is also incorrect. There is only one God, as it says in the mezuzah on the door of every real Torah Jew, which is right back in 2 Chronicles. And you have to read the Bible for what it says. Some things are real plain speaking, and one of them is in 2 Chronicles. The Lord God is one, not three. And, when we talk about the Holy Spirit being in you, it is God in you. So He empowers us. So we're already ruling and reigning, and what we have to do is pick up our scepter and not be silent, not be passive. When we see the coming Revelation, as my son was saying yesterday, we see Revelation being played out specifically by these satanic forces to bring about a cashless society, to bring about world war, to devastate the ozone layer and not fix Fukushima, to spread toxic vaccines. I mean, I believe that monoclonal antibodies could be made to protect people like ZMapp against Ebola. But the dosages will be, number one, very minimal. It will only be for, say, doctors and nurses. It won't be enough for the vast majority of the population of Africa. And what's happening now is the devastation in DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're going to quarantine off over 500 square miles or 1,000 kilometers. This is going to shut down Africa in the next 60 to 90 days. And it'll create a terrorist state, just like the shoe bomber, so that trying to fly internationally will be a horror. It'll be just horrible flying anywhere. And if you're under any suspicion whatsoever, and Obama 3 weeks ago passed an executive order that if you have any respiratory illness, you could be quarantined against your will, even with no symptoms. So those literally immediately transfer authority to the United Nations and the World Health Organization for every country on earth. That's already done, 2005 and 2006. Right. So when people say they want to dispute this or it's a conspiracy theory, how about conspiracy facts? How about just reading? Don't attack the messenger. If I was gone tomorrow, these facts would still be here today. They'd be here tomorrow. They'd be here 10,000 or a million years from now. If someone wanted to be an archaeologist and examine why the civilization on planet Earth died. It died because people were too passive. As Einstein said, evil abounds because, the world will not be destroyed by evil, but by good people that see evil and do nothing. That's what it is.
Right. Yeah, so what would humanity, not conspiracy, and people are
right. It's also pretty straightforward.
In the stupor, I mean, everybody's
it's the same thing with the healthcare system.
Hypnotized by the TV and all the major.
That's right. For example, if I got totally ticked off with just dealing with the stress of trying to tell the truth and the minimal response I get. Again, I realize I'm only speaking what I call the steel wool of civilization. If you want to start a fire, you can use steel wool and a little battery. Most people don't want to hear, and they're shut down and become like little children, or they try to become feigned viciousness and try to do what I call ad hominem attacks against the messenger. When I tell my story about what happened to me in Colorado, I was a occupational medicine, internal medicine rehab doctor, and I was only one of 4 doctors that would go to 5 different panels, certified by the American College for Occupational Environmental Medicine as a medical expert in every specialty. I'm not talking about some, all specialties. from psychiatry to neurology to orthopedic surgery to every specialty. And if I went to court 2 and 3 days a week, and the state of Colorado got enraged because I was not just a minor player. I was one of the only 4 or 5 doctors originally, and down to 2 or 3 doctors. And Dr. Michael Jansen, I'm going to mention his name because if he wants to sue, I'll sue him back and put him in prison. Dr. Michael Jansen was a spine surgeon who threatened me in August of 2000 that I wrote a report on a gentleman who he paralyzed by doing a procedure on who was diabetic, and he did a procedure when there was no indication of instability in his spine, and he put screws through his spinal nerve roots, which I identified in a spinal nerve scan called an Axon 2 that I co-developed with Dr. Jim Hedgecock. And he said, I know the board president of the College of Physicians and Surgeons and other members, and I know the media. And I'm going to get them to try to pull your license. Now, of course, if you're shutting down an industry like a chromium plating plant in Lodo, Colorado, which is near downtown, that's poisoning the local population with vapors because you don't have proper containment, and you contact EPA Section 5, and you contact the fire marshal's office, and you're not just a minor person, but you're the director. In 97, I was the director of OCMED for the entire city of Denver for Health South Corporation. I was not a minor doctor. I was the director. You get in a lot of trouble with people that get very ticked off at you. And I wouldn't back off when I saw things happening where they wanted me to injure patients. Health South director Bob Stoner said to me in 97, Deagle, we're thinking about giving you a $500,000 check if you close 32 cases because we get some very upset industries. And 4 of the people, I said, if I close their case, they're going to die. He said, is that a problem? Now, you have to understand the ontogeny of who Dr. Deagle is. I'm Scottish, Irish, German, British heritage, Lebanese, Maronite, Christian, direct descendant of the general, but otherwise by the name of Moses. And I got a backbone. And I was an excellent surgeon, emergency trauma, burn doctor, intensive care unit. I've also trained myself over the last 35 plus years in functional internal medicine because I literally am one of the doctors that invented this whole field. And the problem is it's based on biochemistry and genetics. And what I've got for it is persecution, going right back to 1980 to 83 when I presented my data to the Ron Carey Diabetic Research Institute at the University of Calgary. And my response by Dr. McEwen was to have a fit in his office and threaten to pull my license for finding that diabetics have high insulin. But everybody today accepts it. But it was my research based on Dr. Kraft at the University of Chicago, who was a pathologist, and Dr. Otto Yoon, head of pathology, worked with me. So that's just one of many battles I fought. So now that I have this platform to speak the truth, I dare anybody to think they can debate me and come out without pieces hanging off them. It's not going to be funny because I have absolute determination. I have the power of the Most High God behind me. I have an intellect God's given me, and I've been through hell. And I will stand up as a warrior with my sword drawn, ready to chop at anybody who thinks they know better than I do. If they can prove it to me, I will accept it, but they have to have really good proof. I lost my mind. And hope you put up with my little rant there, but it's important to understand the perspective and the level of dedication to the knowledge base that I'm trying to present here to the public. And what I would tell people to do is please don't believe anything I say. Go back and check the facts. For example, the BBC News article here, Syria conflict, Islamic State committed war crimes. And they're actually committing war crimes in Syria. Syria should be our ally against this, quote, Islamic State maniacs. But instead, the previous leader that we put in power, who actually is a Shiite, is now allied with Russia and Iran. So we're just creating a much bigger disaster. Now we're doing flights over Syria, over their airspace, which we don't have any right to. We're also flying over the territory, which could potentially start bombing. And that puts the Russian state at much higher risk because, as you mentioned, Mr. Vladimir Zhirinovsky is absolutely determined to start World War III. And the Russians have weapon systems that can completely neutralize our nuclear weapons, our conventional weapons, and put our Navy to the bottom of the ocean floor or the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico, etc. So people should be aware that America is being prepared, just like Israel, for destruction. And there's no need for it. America should be a shining light, like John F. Kennedy said to the whole world, that what is a Christian democracy with proper representative government, a true belief in the documents of the Declaration of Independence, not only from the British banks, but also independence from cults, which are allowed to grow in our country, and cults such as Islam, which is a cult, cults such as cultic Torah, Talmudic Judaism, which is a cult, cultic faith belief systems that can cause destruction to people, not only inside the cult that eventually results in their own destruction, but cultic damage to the nations in which they are in. And we see areas of our country, like up in Deerfield, Michigan, where Muslims are now taking over the area and want Sharia law, the same outside of Montreal, Quebec. So we should be aware that we don't want to just put the name Islam on it. There's many different forms of, I call, real lies going on that are causing, in a sense, religious-based wars, which are basically mind control wars, or financial wars that are occurring right now, stirring behind the scenes, which are in phase 1 of World War III already, where the conflict with Russia is a phase 1 World War III that happened for 20 years before World War I. There were conflicts being set, and the banks were behind it on both sides, trying to create and amplify the conflict so they can get more power and control. So I think it's important for people to be aware that you have to become aware of these things. We can stop it pretty straightforwardly. I believe Ron Paul's policy toward international activity and Rand Paul is much more rational than the base policy of the Republican Party, which is, America warfare first. And of course, I live just south of Pendleton Marine Corps Base, and oftentimes you can hear their bombing and shelling, and it keeps you up late at night because they're even shelling lately, even after 11:30, 12 o'clock at night some nights. And last night I was up and they had these big bright lights up in Pendleton. You can see them right from literally our bedroom, bathroom windows. And I mean, it shakes the ground. I mean, we're 7 miles from their shelling zone where they're doing all the shelling up in this 200 square miles called Pendleton Marine Corps Base, the largest marine base on the planet. So what you be aware of is that America is being used like a golem by the Satanists to force the world into their financial order, to impoverish the population, to eventually reduce the population, and to control any advances in energy technology such as tokamak fusion reactors, life extension technology, a healthy environment for people to have true life extension without toxicity, and of course to re-engineer the human race, which I think is very evil. Eliminating disease is one thing, but re-engineering the human race is quite a different thing altogether. And this, of course, is the reason why ancient civilizations fell too, because we allowed, through passivity, evil to abound in our countries in ancient times, and that's why there is documentation that there was an ancient nuclear war between northwest India, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, where we found signs of micronuclei in the ground. These are by chemists that are not religious people that proved it was a nuclear war. It wasn't due to a comet or an asteroid or anything else. It was due to a nuclear war that occurred in the ancient world. So people should become aware that our civilization has fallen before by natural disasters, by cataclysms in the solar system or cosmos, and by human folly that is being engineered and controlled by higher orders of evil that people don't comprehend. And unfortunately, the public religions don't want to really teach that. They touch around the edges of it, and try to make it seem kind of almost like a fairy tale. But in actual fact, it's very, very real. So that we'll get into that symbology more as we bring on experts on symbology and bring my son back. Matthew's an expert on these areas. Just to give you another update on what's going on with Ebola. The Ebola-infected scientist in Sierra Leone goes to Germany. Canadians are pulled. Scientist who's infected with Ebola while working with the World Health Organization in Sierra Leone has arrived in Germany for treatment in Hamburg Hospital. An unprecedented number of healthcare workers are infected with Ebola. This means it's airborne. And we continue to have the WHO, who, by the way, is a horrible organization based out of Basel, Switzerland. I received documents in 1997, March 16th, from the Human Life International that actually smuggled them out of the WHO headquarters. They're behind a lot of these collaborative projects to create super weapons, to create super biological weapons such as AIDS, sterilization vaccines, and to try to resurrect the swine flu of 1918, which was made by accident when they were trying to create a typhus vaccine in Fort Lupton, Kansas. So people should become aware that this is what's going on. And the flight from Ebola, fingers are crossed. In New Delhi, the enormity of Ebola outbreak hit home on Tuesday as 112 Indians and 4 Nepalese arrived in the country on different flights from Liberia. So there's a lot of flight from these countries before the borders close off. My guess is that Africa will shut down in the next 60 to 90 days. International transport, including not only by air but by boat, if people come from these areas, will be quarantined in Western countries before they're released into the population. I don't think a 30-day quarantine will be sufficient because people could be shedding virus, not demonstrate symptoms, and maybe infected in the late phase, and as a result, they could be carrying it longer. We know that the Ebola can persist in 60 days. So I think that, and this concurs with Henry L. Nyman, who's the director of Recombinetics, that the Ebola will not be contained by a quarantine. It will take years for it to reach a serious crisis in America. My guess is it won't to really take off for probably a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, but in Africa it's already done that. And cases as they seep out, once they get embedded in the population here, will continue to fester, just like West Nile virus and now chikungunya, who's gone all the way up to New York State. Multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, which is now all over America, especially with new cases arriving from these illegal immigrants coming in from Mexico, Central and South America. So the crisis is amplified because they want to make leaky borders. They're allowing also Muslims to come into the country from Yemen and Saudi Arabia as terrorists, many of them paying up to $50,000 to get into the country illegally, and they're told to stand down. The border guards, etc., are told by the federal government under Obama and the regime to not prosecute what they're supposed to be doing, which is to keep America prevented. So from being taken over literally by terrorism. ISIS has actually claimed that they're going to do an attack on Chicago and blow up, quote, a U.S. city. So I expect, and then I spent quite a bit of time with Special Forces in Delta back in the 90s, and one of the times I spent an entire week with them in St. Louis, Missouri. We had an Academy of Environmental Medicine meeting for an entire week, and my special friends that were inside Delta Force were telling me that they were doing all kinds of war games for years, at that time up to 30 years, believe it or not, dealing with the idea of dirty bombs and nukes going off, etc. And people should be aware that the government has war gamed us all out. They have. And they are both the author and so they control both sides of the issue. Just like people don't understand, when you're giving money to Hamas to destroy Israel, you're also arming Israel to destroy Hamas, which is created by Shin Bet and the Israeli government, with help from the CIA and special training that occurs in Jordan and elsewhere. So, people like Barry Chamish, who's aware of these things, he gets in great trouble because he's like me. He's not willing to be silent in the face of this evil. He wants to speak about the truth, because Reformed Jews and Jews that are becoming Messianic are being greatly persecuted, especially Messianic Christian believing Jews that recognize Messiah HaMashiach and the Torah, and not the commentaries of satanic rabbis on the Talmud and the Zohar and the Sifiyat Zaira and all these other evil documents that they publish. So people need to be aware of this, and when they become aware, they'll realize that why science does not move forward to heal and stop illness, why they stack vaccines, why they suppress proper training of doctors to understand functional toxicological medicine, which I think no one should be able to graduate from medical or surgical school, chiropractic school, naturopathy, etc., unless they have training in what I call functional genetic and epigenetic medicine. I think it's an obscenity in the 21st century that we consider a medical system that thinks toxic polypharmacy. And many times these drugs are released, like Xarelto is the latest list, that causes massive bleeding problems, stroke, heart, and gastrointestinal and GI tract bleeding, and death. And now major lawsuits are going on.